Welcome everybody to the Quiet Before. This is another series, another episode of the Quiet Before series, which has been an amazing initiative curated by Nancy Cow and her team. Really exploring and teaching folks a little bit about the API histories that the larger mainstream may not be familiar with, and especially speaking to the folks who've lived through it, whether it's the founding of the Asian American Writers Workshop, whether it's talking about anti-Asian violence from a historical standpoint, a larger historical context than just stop Asian hate, whether it's talking about people doing interesting things with APIs and food, and publishing, so many wonderful topics, and we're truly grateful here to have this forum for us old friends and family to gather to talk about the poets, those poets of your of the late 90s and early 2000s, and the movements and the communities that we were part of and initiated so much. Wanted to start off with some land and ancestry acknowledgements, and then move in through various themes, and really try to hear from all the amazing folks here. I'm calling from the traditional lands of Lenape-Hoking and the Canarsie people. We recognize your stewardship of this land, water, and living creatures, and commit to being in solidarity against continued forces of colonization and imperialism by honoring the resilience of First Nations, their relatives, our collective liberation, and the interdependence of all beings. Setting some context here, this was brought to the attention, this theme, through Nancy Cow, having talked with Jessica Hagedorn about what can be done, what else can be done in her series. And Nancy asked me the question of, well, who do you think your most immediate people are, your most immediate artistic community is? And I said, without a doubt, these poets of the late 90s and early 2000s, when we were doing all these collective work, all the summit work, all these various movements before social media was really a thing. And to quote Bao, when you really had to meet a motherfucker to get this work done, through open mics, through various grassroots initiatives. And that brought us to get this group here. And it's not the whole group. We're always gonna be missing folks. I think each of us can bring and wanted maybe 5 other people here, but for this time and this purpose and this iteration, we have this wonderful collective here. And the story is never truly completely told, and it's forever in process. But hopefully we will do our best to represent, and also always allow for that welcoming spirit for others to partake in this storytelling. I do want to give a special shout out to Adrian Lewis. I know he had done some archiving work like a while back. There's a website where he did some oral history work with some of y'all, Bao and Maya and maybe some others around, trying to record that history of the first summit in 2001. But beyond that, I think here in 2022, and the pandemic, and so much has happened since then. And I imagine the way we make sense of 2001 and around that time period has changed. So our first theme, if I could pass it around, is your origin story and entryway into this work and this generation. Like, how did you come into this landscape of doing poetry and spoken word and cultural organizing in the late 90s into the '01 APIA Spoken Word and Poetry Summit? And maybe we could start with the Seattle folks, because it really did start with the Seattle folks in many ways, with the Sham-e-Ali Arts Collective. And I'll put some of our prompts in the chat too.
Who are you pointing to, Gio?
You was already there by the time I got there, so.
Okay. Wow, shoot. The first question, the first prompt, yo. Oh man. Okay, bear with me. I'm old, like I said before, but and overwhelmed by seeing you all after so much time and feeling still so connected, you know. Same, you know, like I feel like we're cut from the same cloth. So I don't know, my heart is pounding. I feel good. And also I'm feeling a lot. I haven't revisited these memories in so long. Actually, ever. I don't think the previous conversations I wasn't a part of. So you know, this is my first time going back in this way. So thank you for calling me out, Taiyo and Nancy. My journey to poetry, I have to say, like Basketball Diaries, Jim Carroll. He's the reason why I started writing, honestly. I mean, I was writing stuff, but then I started making the form of poetry through there. And then I kind of like was going to like FONS conferences, the Filipino American National Historical Society. Is that what it's called? Those conferences, and going to Washington State University, being, you know, one of the very few minorities or like people of color in vast white, you know, like campuses, and starting the Filipino American Student Association over there. So we were really amped up, you know, just really like I was kind of angst and stuff. And I went to the FONS conferences, you know, very much feeling empowered through those. And then I ran into, I met Wendell Pasquale, who created the Deconstruct zine at that time, and the, what was the open mic also he started there? Anyways, you know what I'm saying? He had like an open mic, and at the FONS conference in New York. And that was the very first time I ever got on the mic ever. I was very inspired by Don Mamalan, rest in peace. Wendell, they both were just a force, and they super inspired me to share my poetry for the first time on the mic. So I give a lot, you know, I owe a lot of why I'm where I'm at because of them. And then from there, I got inspired to start an open mic in Washington State University. I even forgot the name of it. It was like Filipino American History Month in conjunction with LGBTQ month. And then me and this person started an open mic there. At the same time in Seattle, my ex Jojo got on, and Jamie Ardenia, they started, I think Paul Felix was in the mix, started the open mic in Seattle. So there was just like this real momentum at the time. And so we were just doing our things, like having open spaces for expression for everyone and anyone to kind of like express themselves. And that's kind of like how I entered the spoken word poetry scene. And then from there, you know, it's not like we started Sham-e-Ali, you know, I started being back in Seattle more, and then we started doing the college conference circuits, performing for various events, and then from there we met Two Tongues in Chicago, and then that was just like crazy. I remember that meeting. We were just like, who are you? Who, you know, we were just like seeing each other in the mirror or something like that. It was just like soul connection right away with them. And so we just stayed in connection. It kind of was like that, you know, everywhere we went in college conferences, we would just meet folks and it would just be like, it would just kind of like almost like this river was flowing and all these like other, you know, this tributary that it just was like stronger and stronger. And then we just stayed connected throughout our journeys in this kind of like self-expression, spoken word and all that. And then I think then we kind of reconnected with Two Tongues in Seattle. I don't remember, another conference or something. And we had like we were just kicking it, we just kind of like came up with this idea about this summit, like having a picnic or something. I don't know, remember what we were in the park and that's when it all kind of like came out like all at once, like Anida, Marlon, Dennis, Emily, Jojo, me, Jamie. I forget, sorry if I forgot anyone else, but we were all just like, yeah. And so I feel like everything just came out in that moment. And then we stayed in touch about, you know, in email, kind of like sending poetry to each other, just really feeling this like need to do this like summit gathering, bringing all the folks together. And it was really beautiful, actually. Like, I still remember this book you guys gave us with all the poems and the emails printed out at that time. And it was just, it's like, dang, we were feeling it. I mean, we were like really like hopeless, romantic, fierce, like kind of like feeling like poetry in a way I've never felt before, like ever since. It was like we really believed in our words and what we were expressing to each other and in our connection and what we were doing. Like we were really creating a space for other people to kind of like feel the same, like, or, you know, feel free or whatever, transcend or whatever they needed to do. We were kind of like helping each other get through whatever we needed to do through art, through poetry. And it was realer than real, you know, like looking back, I'm like, dang, you know, we're just like romantic poets, just like saying all this and that. But at the moment we were just like, it was just realer than real, like everything depended on it. So yeah, that's kind of like how it happened for me, I think. Sorry if I'm missing a lot of details.
I guess I'll hop in because it picks up kind of where you left off. Thank you, Maya. Ate Maya. That was what my Ate Maya. And it was really that. I was like one of the younger people when Maya said that the OGs were going from to the college conferences and doing the open mic thing. I came along probably like a year and a half to 2 years into it. So this was like 99, early 99. I remember there was a CD release party for which blew my mind at the time, that like, you know, this group of mostly Filipino folks just made a CD, right? And I don't even know where to start because it feels like it was a inevitable convergence of these things that were beyond all of us. Because when I finally, by the time I started going to Isama Hall, I was more of like I was a hip hop head in search of a stage, and not feeling, and kind of being in the hip hop scene, but also feeling a little bit like, you know, I was on the sidelines there, or everyone kept thinking I was a b-boy or a DJ and not taking me seriously as a microphone wielder. So when I heard that these open mics were going, and he saw and one in the Chinatown ID, I was like, I'm there. So I went with a few of my friends, and we actually we were lurkers. We were like these like seniors in high school, freshmen in college type folks who would be in the back and kind of chuckle at most of the poetry, but then like cry every once in a while, you know. It so happened that on the side, I was a part of a hip hop organization at the campus of University of Washington, and I was while I was going to Isama Hall shows, I was also doing like the early internet thing, like trying to find other Asian rappers and things like that. And I happened upon this group. Well, on top of the OGs, Mountain Brothers from Philly, I came across this group called the Pacifics from Chicago, and I reached out to them. And this was like like nothing at the time. I thought this has nothing to do with like the summer hall shows I'm going to. Then I get in touch with them. I start online AOL Instant Messenger relationships with these cats, including their whole affiliate fam, KP, Rex, Q Propaganda, and then Jonah, of course, and then Jonah was like, "Hey, I manage Pacifics, and then I'm also working with this other group called I Was Born with Two Tongues." I was like, "Tell me more." And she actually sent me, mailed me both like a Pacific sampler CD, a bunch of stickers, and a copy of Broken Speak. I Was Born with Two Tongues, Broken Speak CD. Um, Popped that in, and I was like, "What the fuck?" Like my mind exploded. Um, and then I was inspired to actually get on the mic at Islam Hall, which is weird, right? Like I was inspired by a Chicago group to get on an open mic in my own backyard, and I was too scared to get on. What I didn't know was like these motherfuckers already knew each other. That Dennis Kim had already done a show at the Hugo House months before. That some of them had already like. I was like, how is this even possible? This was like pre-social media, whatever. I was like, okay, this is where I need to be. At the same time, I was like super into now Professor Oliver, but Oliver Wang's he had a blog. He was like one of the OG hip hop music journalists online, but he would always insert like, and I remember like when he first put up, he talked about a grain of sand, like this album called A Grain of Sand. And so I was learning about all this stuff all at the same time. There was like a definite politicization around my identity as a Filipino American, as a young Asian American. I shifted away from computer science to ethnic studies while I was at UW. Started skipping class, going to hip hop shows, the summer hall shows. Got in the writing circles and all those things. And I leveraged my pull with the hip hop crew on campus at UW to do a all API hip hop spoken word show that ended up being the Seattle stop of the Yellow Technicolor 2000 tour, which was I Was Born with Two Tongues at Pacifics, and we hosted that near the UW campus. And that was the first time I was ever on stage as a rapper. I was opening up for this show, and I remember I wasn't there at the initial conversations of like, hey, we should kind of all get together and something. Well, that something ended up being like, I think 12 months later in 2001, the summit. And all these people that I was already either hearing about or only knew online in that year. And from 2000 to 2001, everything changed. And my entry point was weird. Like there's this thing happened in my own backyard, but I went like the back route to get there. And then once I was there, that monthly open mic and being able to like travel on top of that, like being able to go after the summit to check out a feedback show in New York, to check out Bao in Minneapolis. Like it was wild. It was almost like a fever dream looking back at it all. But that was my entry point: hip hop, open mic, campus, and then the work of organizers like Maya to even create spaces for me to walk into. Oh, and that's it. I could talk more, but I'm gonna pass the baton to. I think I'm looking at you, Anita. Like you cross over into this part of the story.
Yeah, no, thank you. So I'm coming from Puyallup land, and I just want to acknowledge that I live, work, and raise my kids on the land that was stewarded by the original peoples of this area, the Puyallup tribe, who are still here and who are still resisting and living and trying to thrive under these settler colonialism parameters. Gosh, it's so beautiful to see everyone here and to hear about, especially Maya and Geo, how you found each other through Isang Mahal. Isang Mahal is at the core of also how we started to see ourselves beyond the four of us. So in fact, it was Isang Mahal who created, I would say, and inspired the four of us, being I was born with two tongues, which includes Marlon Esguerra, Dennis Kim, Emily Chang, and myself, Anida Yoeu Ali. And really, it started with Marlon and Dennis being in the open mic scene in Chicago in 1997 and 98. So after my undergrad years and moving to Chicago, and at the time living and being partnered with Marlon, and he was doing the open mic scene and I was the doting partner, just accompanying him. And really that was it. I had no intention to do any sort of writing or poetry. I was just there to support. And then he goes to all these different open mic scenes, and he comes back one night and says, I have just met the most incredible poet. I don't know where this kid has come from. You have to come. You have to come to the next thing. I know it's like super late, but you've got to come. And it was Dennis Kim. And I'm like, okay, well, yeah, let's go. Let's check this out. And he was absolutely right. Dennis was energetic, amazing, doing complicated work that was, so lyrical, and put his guts and his heart out there on that floor every day. And I'd never heard anything like it. And the two of them came together and decided they were going to keep going to open mics. And a few months later, we find out that Dennis has a girlfriend, and we're all that's the introduction of Emily Chang, and we're all kind of going to these open mics together. And again, Emily and I just being the doting partners, watching them do their thing and, applauding and just meeting people. And then one day we hear, and at this point, we know like they are the only two Asian Americans and Asian American men in a scene that's predominantly Black and Latino and male, very male. And it was just happenstance that we got an email saying there was some conference featuring some Filipino poets at Illinois State University, which is downstate from us, about a 2-hour drive. And we're like, yeah, let's go. We have nothing else to do, So it was like a short road trip with the four of us going down, and just wanting to be in presence of more visibility, more bodies. And we were completely blown away by them. And they were telling us how bored they were because they thought Bloomington was Chicago. So we're like, this isn't Chicago. This is like rural Illinois. Why don't you guys just come with us? And so we pile into our car and like grab 6 of them, and maybe it was over 2 cars, and bring them to Chicago. And they are about to leave the next day. So they had only a window of time to come and explore Chicago, spend this time with us. And it was an all-nighter. Nobody slept because we had to get them back so that they could either do a workshop or something. And then it was just like a total experience of, when you meet folks who inspire you in such a way that you don't know what to do with that energy, but you know that it has to move you to the next. And that was what they did for us. And because we saw also women go up on the mic and perform, it gave Emily and I the courage that maybe we could do this. And what started out as essentially a sort of love letter to them, a series of love letters, because we were so inspired, we just started writing things down. And that was how we collected our poetry, and there were lots of back and forth emails and just sharing things. And that was essentially how Emily and I got involved. And then we had been given an opportunity by the Mad Bar hosts of an open mic scene in Chicago, saying, hey, I have this one night and I'm featuring people. Do you guys want to do something like with a bunch of Asian Americans? And Marlon and Dennis, at the time we were still doing the scene, said, yeah, do we know anyone? Like, who wants to do this with us? It's like, we'd love to share the stage. Who do we call on? And we were like kind of struck that there was no one. And so I think Emily and I were like, oh, yeah, I guess we could do it. We were just writing some things for Isang Mahal. Let's give it a try. And I don't know, it just started so naturally and organically. And we pulled all these things together. And I'm personally coming from a background where in my undergrad years, I'm fighting for Asian American studies and an Asian American cultural center. So I'm coming already with a specific politicization that is, centering the arts as a voice for social change. And I had been reading so much work around the Yellow Power movement. And those are things that we were constantly talking about, the four of us, and the things that we were carrying into the conversation that was just the four of us, and getting angry about all the different injustices, but also because we didn't have a lot of Asian Americans in Chicago that we were around. We were aligning ourselves with others in the community who were mostly Black and brown folks. And so that opened us into a whole nother realm of, police brutality and fighting against police brutality, and noticing the injustices around Mumia Abu Jamal. And so that was where we were coming from in terms of the kind of activism we were drawn to. It wasn't just Asian specific. It was that we understood that, our liberation was directly tied to the liberation of other communities who have suffered so severely and continue to. And so that was a really important thing, because it made us really like kind of unapologetic for who we were, because we felt already marginalized and ostracized from the mainstream Asian American community, who we felt were like a little bit softer and, kind of more into getting a 9-to-5 job and just kind of doing their thing. And so we essentially did this show at Mad Bar, which was supposed to be just a one-night event with the four of us, and we needed a catchy name, and it was Dennis who proposed. We had a whole list of different names, and Dennis pulled out this sentence, "I was born with two tongues," and it resonated with us, and we're like, that's it, let's call it "I was born with two tongues" for this one night. And we filled the house, it was packed, and we did our thing, and the energy was incredible. People were moved to tears. It was a standing ovation. And that was when the journey really took off for us in terms of people really seeing us. And I mean, like, we were still getting pretty racist comments like, "I just didn't realize you could rap," like to Dennis, or "Wow, your English is so perfect," like all these things. And so we kind of realized that, and then of course we had the Asian Americans in the audience who were tearing up, were crying, who were just overfilled with a lot of emotions. And from that moment on, word spread pretty fast by word of mouth. of who we were. And so we were being booked for a lot of different political gatherings. That's how it began. So a lot of work with, again, Autonomous Zone, Revolutionary Bookstore, like all of the sort of left-wing folks were kind of grabbing us, and we were doing all the protests. And then some Asian Americans started booking us to a conference called CASCON in Stanford. And that was the game changer, really, in terms of introducing us to the rest of Asian America, meaning the mainstream Asian Americans at all the conferences. And once we started doing that scene, we started to connect and see other people, because every city we would go, we would make sure to find sort of the underground, the underground scene and where spoken word was happening outside of these conferences and these university settings. And then I think that is how we got to New York, where we met Regie, and he did some Broadway rendition of something at a house party that blew us away. Beau Sia was a name we all knew because we were looking for Asian Americans, and he was the lone cat at like all these different things in terms of the slam scene in New York. And we remember him so specifically because we were like, that guy is doing it. We need to meet that guy. Like such a big fan of yours. Meeting Ishle, because she did a press coverage of us, I think it's Sarah Lawrence. And so seeing her take her route, meeting Yalini in Houston, and Yalini opened my eyes to multidisciplinary and interdisciplinary work, because she was dancing and doing her poetry and singing, and it was just like, this is so amazing. Sham-e-Ali, at a conference around the abuse of women. It was the Insight Conference, and connected on a deep soul level. Taiyo at another New York conference, and Bao Phi, of course, in Chicago and onwards. So just seeing everybody fueled us and kept us going. And we came to a point where we realized we were getting a lot of attention, but it needed to be redirected, because we wanted people to see that it wasn't just us. There were all these other people around the country that were doing this and doing it so well, and that we're not alone. None of us should ever feel like we're alone. And so that was the whole point of gathering people. It was a roll call. It was a stand up Asian America and come and see yourselves and connect and see who's out there. And then you take the baton and you go and you do something with this energy, because it was the same energy that we felt from Isang Mahal that fueled us for all those early years from 98 onwards.
Are we just going, or like what or what's the order? Is there an order, or are we just talking?
No order.
All right.
Hey, I think it should be you, Bao. And
All right. So real quick, I started doing what they call spoken word in my high school speech team in 1991 or 1992. And I'm going to fast forward. I went through college and started slamming. It was like a natural. It wasn't a big deal for me. I always thought, I was broke. And I was like, no one's gonna give a shit about your grumpy ass Vietnamese American poems. But if I could like win one of the top 3, I would get like a cash prize, right? And that would help pay the bills. And I just kept winning, and I didn't expect that. And just really quick, some background. So in Minneapolis, St. Paul, even back then, there was a very politicized Asian American artist community, but I was the only one doing what we call spoken word. And so it was this great thing where I had mentorship, but they weren't in my aesthetic, but they were Asian American artists who were very politicized. But it felt lonely, right? It felt like lonely in terms of like, I don't want to be the only one, like I think a lot of us can probably share that feeling of being the only one, the weird Asian doing poetry. And so we went to the Nationals. It was 1998 in Austin. And I went to a movie theater where they were showing this documentary called Slam. Was this called Slam Nation? And I remember the very first person that on the screen was this Asian dude, and I was like, "Oh shit, this is Asian dude. And it's like, it's Beau Sia, right? And I was like, get the fuck out of here. There's more Asians doing this. And I kid you not, I walk out of the movie theater and Beau is like in the fucking street. And I'm like, hey man, I just saw you. And he was like, hey, you know. And I was like, I'm gonna introduce myself to every Asian poet I see at nationals. Because again, this is before Facebook, before YouTube. And I met Kelly Tsai. I was like, hey, what's up? My name's Bao. And Kelly was like, who the fuck are you, right? But like, you know, shortly thereafter, at some point, I had heard about the Tongues. I saw them in Chicago. I was blown away. I remember trying to figure out any chance I caught coming back to Chicago, sleeping on usually Anida and Marlon's floor. And that's, you know, that's how I met Pacifics. I was at that show in Chicago where I met Eighth Wonder and Geo for the first time, being blown away by all of them. And then Dennis from the Tongue started, he signed up with a kind of a shady agency, but he wanted like other poets to kind of join him on these tours he started getting booked at. And he wanted me to be one of them. And he's like, you gotta meet this poet named Ishle, man. Like, she's so dope. And I met Ishle, she's dope. I did like some bullshit ass show in New York in the late 90s. And nobody gave a shit that I was there except for like these 3 or 4 Asians who had come. I don't know who told them to come, but they came, and I talked to them afterwards. One of them was Kai Ma. And, you know, Kai and I stayed in touch. And, you know, eventually I got to know Feedback, right? You know, Ishle, Beau, Taiyo, all these cats in New York. A good college friend of mine who worked for OCA was like, you got to meet this dude named Giles. Like, you two would get along so well, you got to meet him. So I met this dude named Giles, like the coolest motherfucker on earth, right? And, you know, Regie was a legend. I met him at a slam, one of the slams. I met folks like Maya in the Song Mahal at the first summit, because I think Anida, after you all had been talking, you had emailed some folks in Minneapolis letting us know. And of course we were so excited, right? Because, you know, just to be in space with other Asian American poets, it was just like, so, like, I can't describe that feeling, you know, meeting Yalini and Sham, you know, and all of you all, and like hearing your work. It's like, you know, you want something so bad, like you need something so bad, and you go without it for so long, and then it feels like it's being gifted to you. And that's really how I felt about like hearing not only like the poetry of everybody here, but also like Taiyo said, all the voices that aren't here. You know, that's what I miss most about those days, is that feeling of connection and wonder and community. So yeah, I'll just stop there. And if we're popcorning, I'll pass it to Sham.
Thanks, Bao. It's so nice. It's just so nice to hear everybody's voices and see you and hear this beautiful history and the ways in which it just was a very magical moment, in the ways in which all of us connected in all these differing ways. So on one point, I remember being published in this magazine called Roots and Culture Magazine, and Ishle was published in that same magazine. And I was just like, I've made it. I'm in a journal with Ishle, who I just like low key would, you know, at the time I lived in the New York area, and, you know, I just was enamored by her work. And at the time, I was also a movement lawyer doing work with family and intimate partner violence survivors, but always doing poetry in the nights and being part of collectives. And I think that's how my path crossed with Yalini, who was a part of the South Asian women's creative collective. And I remember a friend of mine was in a show that Beau was in that show. And I just remember being just like, it was just so magical time in terms of just the expression and love of poetry that was taking place. But the point where I was really pulled in to Summit was in a conference. It was one of the first Insight conferences at the time. They called it The Color of violence. And, you know, it was filled with artists and organizers. And that's where Anida and Emily were sitting right in front of me in a very kind of powerful moment. And we were calling in folks that couldn't be in that room. And the person I called, a family member, Anida knew. And she turned around and we just both had a really deep moment of connection. And they were like, here's our CD. We're going to give you a CD. We're going to do this and that. I was like, I love you guys. Don't ever leave my life. And I remember popping that CD on the plane ride back and being like, oh, wow. It was that feeling of like, I just have been waiting for this. And, you know, but it connecting with all the other things that were also happening. And it's really weird. Like yesterday I was, well, okay, just rewind back. So that might've been like 1999. So I didn't have a child yet. 9/11 hadn't happened. You know, so by the time I heard about the first summit, I was a new mother. And in this very moment in my own life where I was just impacted by everything, where I wasn't getting on a plane and going anywhere with my like newborn child. So I wasn't able to make it to the first summits, but still I would find Anida whenever she would come to New York. And like we would connect. And I would definitely follow around Ishle and follow around Beau in New York, and definitely Yalini would always change my life. And we, you know, just so many special moments. So yesterday I happened to be cleaning up my archives of things I have here. And I have everybody's chapbook, I might add, and I have everybody's CDs, everybody's, including Giles, and like 2 of Taiyo's. And I fought for poetry, and I met people that fought for poetry, not just to express, but because we loved our communities, but because we loved liberation for our communities and other communities who are being oppressed, that, you know, we saw something in poetry that was a spark, that was a liberator. And we loved it. Like, it didn't matter that nothing was being paid. It didn't matter like whatever was going on in our lives, like how many different ways we were piecing our lives together to like make it to these places, to make it to be with each other and listen, not just speak our poems, but listen to each other. And I felt heard, I felt witnessed, and I saw and I witnessed. And I was cleaning up these archives, and Jason Bayani happened to hit me up because I posted one of his chapbooks that I had. He's like, man, that's really old. And I was like, yeah. I was like, we fought for this. And I had a moment just talking with him, like, we really fought for poetry, and I think we still do. And I don't think it's limited to the we that's in these Zoom cameras. It was a really special moment in time, I think. And I'm very grateful for the folks that took the leadership to cultivate the spaces, to hone in on that energy and that hunger everybody had and that love everybody had. And so for me, I was a poet prior to meeting folks, but it helped expand me as the poet that I am, and feel more comfortable and safe. But not just that, those bigger principles, like those bigger purposes, that was such an important part for me. And I felt so grateful that I met folks that also had that passion and love for our communities, and that it wasn't just the aesthetics of poetry, but the aesthetics were there too. And that, so I really love you guys. And I apologize if I forgot, I know I met Regie at the Boston Summit, Taiyo at the Boston Summit, Geo, you were there with your family. So it was like me and you with kids. And I felt like, oh, thank God. Because I remember just coming in there as this like, oh, I have my toddler son, I had a car seat on my back, a stroller like strapped to my front and my child. And then I was like, there's another person, parent. And, you know, I just remember meeting y'all. And that was really special. Now our kids are like in college age. And, you know, Yalini, of course, we've had so many decades, even prior to Summit, traveling together as poets and artists. And, you know, Bao, of course, like life-changing moments when meeting you and becoming family. And I swear I've kept all your CDs, and I would really like listen to all of it. And I would read your chapbooks, and it just meant the world to me. And I have them in my archives like holy books or something. They're in such pristine condition, and I just valued them so much. Like it meant the world to me. So thank you so much to the folks here, the folks that are not here. I could just keep going down the list of names of so many people that impacted me so deeply as an artist, as a person, as a mother, as a Muslim woman, as a South Indian, you know, so many different ways that you deeply impacted me. So I am going to pass the baton to Yalini.
Thanks, y'all. It's really powerful to listen to everyone. Well, origin story. I mean, I started off as an actor. So I did community theater as starting in junior high school, and studied theater when I went to university. And I think there's two streams that intersected that brought me into this world. I was struggling with racism, colorism within theater and the theater department, as well as in creative writing. And I was sitting in Dr. Stephen Gerald's office. Dr. Stephen Gerald has now passed on. Great honor and respect, and crying because I was like, I don't know where's the space for me, right? Like, how am I going to do this? And because it's the late 90s and there just weren't parts for people who look like me, right? And I was like in competition with some of my best friends with Crystal Stone to be like Tituba in the Crucible, right? So like I was just like, what am I doing, right? And Omi Oshun, Joni Jones walked by the office while I'm like wiping up my tears, and Stephen was like, Omi, we need some help here. And then Omi was like, well, Sharon Bridgeforth is facilitating this writing workshop. Why don't you come to this writing workshop? Just like passing the office was like, go to Sharon's workshop. So in Sharon Bridgeforth's workshop, I started to write, and the seeds started to blossom. At the same time, and we also, some of us got together, and we started a theater company of color at University of Texas called Drive-By Players. And then at the same time, I started getting involved with an Asian American students group called ARG, and we fought for Asian American studies at the University of Texas, and we won eventually and established Asian American studies. But while we were doing that, it was definitely a struggle. We ended up doing direct action, so then there was definitely resistance to that. Through ARG, I started being exposed to Asian American history. I was brought into ARG by Quincy Tran, who is Vietnamese American. And I think for me, it was the first time I was in even a South Asian, Asian American, any space that acknowledged like the legacy of war or the refugee experience, which was, though I was born outside of Sri Lanka, much of my family migrated through asylum. And some of the most influential people in my life were refugees, but it was almost like the silenced experience that wasn't really talked about. And I had this feeling like I should feel so grateful to be in this country. And it kept me in a very kind of assimilated position politically. And so I think being exposed to ethnic studies and the histories of Black, Indigenous, people of color, and specifically also Asian Americans, and the global context really started to awaken my mind in a different way. And I felt like theater was my craft. It was something I'd been working on technically since I was 12 years old. Dance was my passion. I didn't feel like I was the best dancer, but I felt like I loved it, and it was something that vibrationally I was able to emit. And then poetry was like my liberation. It was what helped me understand myself within, instead of being like, I'm mad and like my family is like not normal. I was like, oh, this world is mad, this world has put us in this position, and so I feel like, and then also in Austin at that time, through Sharon Bridgeforth, Sharon had many poetry babies, right? So Piper Anderson, Florinda Bryant, they were cultivating, feminists of color, Black-led feminists of color, poetry spaces. They ran a space called Estroflow. And so those were influencing me. And then I was getting the politicization from ARG, and then it was starting to come out for me artistically through this mix of poetry, theater, dance, and song. Then I went to New York to visit. One of my friends in the theater department was like, forget this degree, I'm moving to New York City. So I went to visit this friend. And when I was there, that's when I stumbled onto the Asian American Writers Workshop in the basement and found a Bamboo Girl zine, Sabrina Margarita Alcantara Tan's zine. And I was like, what is this zine? And I brought it back and I shared it with some of the ARG folks. And then somebody else from ARG went to New York and saw Two Tongues and came back with y'all's CD. And we were like, what? And then I saw Slam, I think around the same time, and Saul Williams and Beau Sia. And I was like, okay, suddenly it seemed like there was like this poetry explosion all around me, but and that it seemed like this magnet and this string theory, vibrational electricity this situation where things were just like popping up and magnetizing all around. And as ARG, when we were fighting for Asian American studies, we were just like, look, we were in that that conversation that many organizers are in, where are we so left and so politicized and so forward thinking that we are not actually base building and not actually reaching out to are we depth or reach, right? Was always like this. And we were like, what's going to be effective in us getting us an Asian American Studies program is we actually need to engage other Asian Americans on campus. And so, we were so inspired by Two Tongues CD, and we were just like, we're going to bring them to campus and they're going to perform for the sororities and the fraternities, so we organized, the Katie Pies and got there weren't South Asian frats and sororities yet, but got the APIA frats and sororities, filled an auditorium, brought Two Tongues, and then drive-by players we opened for Two Tongues. And, you know, I was pretty, you know, funky, queer, hairy armpits out, you know, like a little much for the sororities. The click, 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 click. Yeah, they were like, what's that? But so when I remember performing and being like, oh my gosh, like this is a lot for them, but we're gonna do this. And Dennis and Kane gave me a solo standing ovation. And I was like, oh. And I'd heard the CD and I knew who Dennis was. And I was just like, so, you know, Dennis popped up quick and was like, and then Two Tongues got a full standing ovation at the end, you know, but I got my solo standing O from Dennis. And afterwards, you know, I went up to Dennis. I was like, thank you so much. And he was like, you're good, you know. He's like, I don't stand up for everybody. I get bored. I perform at these things all the time and I sometimes want to go to sleep, and you were good. And I was like, okay. And then I moved to New York in 99. I was part of, I participated in Youth Summer Solidarity Summer, which was a South Asian leftist summer camp, I guess. And that's where I met Dilo, Pradeepa. I had met Varuni at a conference at Oberlin that Dilo and I were both at. I was in the hotel room and Dilo comes banging on the door being like, she's Sri Lankan, you know. But Varuni then came to YSS and we were able to deepen our connection there. Seeing Dilo really, I mean, I thought I was the only one. I didn't know there were other Sri Lankan Tamils doing anything. It was like, what? Definitely listening to Two Tongues also was that was the first time I heard also, again, now, you know, politically Quincy had, you know, drawn me in around affirming refugee and legacy of war experience and intergenerational trauma, but poetically, Anida's poetry really was very opening. And later, when I was introduced to Bao's as well, that was really extremely powerful for me to just have that experience acknowledged, because I think growing up in our era, like, it was just like this weird thing where it's like in school or whatever, you just don't talk about those things and it's embarrassing and shameful. And then sometimes something pops off on the news about, you know, a refugee community and you resonate and you feel that and you're like, that's what happened to our peoples too. And then, like, I remember, like, you know, hearing about, you know, Haitian refugees and, you know, other communities that were, you know, but we have these like little blips in the news, right? And then to actually hear the exile, refugee, legacy of war experience be spoke to with dignity, with love, with power, was something that was really transformative. And then, and so, you know, Youth Solidarity Summer connected me more to the South Asian ecosystem, and specifically to Dilo and Pradeepa. And then in 2000, I moved to New York. Oh, also 99 during YSS. I went to the Open Slam at the Nuyorican and I won. Back then, there wasn't a 3-minute time limit. That's what fucked me up in the slam scene. I'm a storyteller, so, you know, my shit wouldn't stay within the time limits. And so but I won the Open Slam and then got invited to feature, et cetera, et cetera. So then, you know, was able to move and learn from, you know, the poetry ecosystem in New York and be inspired. And through that met Breon Baines, who invited me to join Blackout Arts Collective, and Suhair Ahmad, and so many other just incredible folks. And that's how I also came to learn of your work, Ishle. And so it was then 2000, I finally moved to New York, and Emily hits me up. Emily Chang hits me up and is like, we're starting this group, Mango Tribe. Will you join? I was like, are you kidding? Y'all are my heroes. Of course I'll join. And that's how I met the tribe. You know, Emily Chang, Kelly Sai, Jennifer Samdatnya Armas, Jill Aguado, and Anne Pucherian, who, yes, and just, you know, and today is the 1-year anniversary of Anne's passing. And Vanessa De Gia. I mean, I'm gonna miss folks, Kai T, Cal. I mean, I want to shout out all of us, Sarwat Rumi, Kay Barrett. There's just Lani Montreal. Just there's y'all, you know, don't hate me. I'm forgetting. I should have put the list in front of me so I could shout out everyone. But I'm you know, just was you know, transformed by that conversion of folks as well. And then, you know, I think, you know, Sham-e-Ali and I, we had the multiple convergences, right? So I think we, you know, South Asian Women's Creative Collective, absolutely, definitely. And then also APIA Summit. And then I think also just like the post 9/11 solidarity as well. And just, I think there was also a way in which we saw how each other weren't necessarily fitting into dominant South Asian spaces, weren't fitting into dominant APIA spaces, recognizing that, you know, the experience of being Alangay Tamil and Christian in South Asian spaces, and then the experience of being Indian Muslim in South Asian spaces that were dominated by Hindu Brahmin culture and thus politics as well during a certain period, you know, meant that we needed each other. We needed to acknowledge and be and strengthen and reaffirm each other. So I think there's more space now politically for those kind of conversations. We didn't have a lot of space for that when we were young. And so it's just, you know, there was like a consistent, constant kind of exclusion and misrepresentation that we were contending with, not only within South Asian spaces, but then also like, you know, in broader, you know, spaces as well, where we were both representing, being like some of the sole representatives sometimes of the South Asian experience, while we were also, our experience was being kind of dismissed and denied as well. And so, you know, navigating what it meant to be that kind of ambassador during that time, I think was really important, you know, like solidarity, you know, and yeah, and that's how I, you know, came into the different spaces. I mean, and then I feel like, you know, like, Taiyo, we had like so many multiple intersections also, because there was also, you know, my my brother and his friends were also involved with Fast Break, with the Asian American basketball scene. And then, you know, we had poetry and music. I feel like we would go to the same dance parties and we'd, you know, catch each other on the floor. And so it was just, it was that New York vibe, right? Of just like, of, party, poetry, catch somebody's basketball game. Yeah, BK, right. It was a Brooklyn time. It was a Brooklyn time. So, and then, somehow, I learned about y'all through Two Tongues and then through the Mango Tribe. I think y'all know that we, one of the songs that we sang in the opening of Sisters in the Smoke was one that we learned from Asang Mahal. The Asian Arts Initiative in Philly was where I also met Rodney, and then Regie and I got closer through Asian Arts Initiative as well. I think Beau, we met at, I think through summits perhaps. I remember us dancing. You were also, we like to party, we like to dance. I was a club kid. I was out. I was nightlife, So, those were like the, I think all the different tendrils. When Ishle Yi became poet laureate, we were all like, we were just so proud, we just felt so like, that, yeah, one of our own is repping so hard for us, and skillfully as well. I think that was also part of it, was just like, we also, we believed in skill. I think we were committed to craft as well. The vibration, the craft, the connection, the community. So I'm gonna pass it to Beau. Beau Sia.
Here I fucking go. All right, here we go. I'm ready. I've prepared for this moment. Fuck. All right, y'all. How did I? Anyway, y'all. So I'm from pre-internet Oklahoma and shit, and so I got this whole other mentality rolling up into New York. Like fuck y'all. And to be honest, if I don't visit my uncle in the Bronx from Oklahoma and convince him to drive us to the Nuyorican on a fucking Friday at like fucking 11 at night, and shit, I don't see Regie Cabico crush a slam, right? If I don't see Regie Cabico crush a slam, I don't have this door open inside of me of possibility. Now in Oklahoma, I needed to create a wall of arrogance, right? That gave me possibility, like, fuck all y'all in Oklahoma. One day I'll move to New York, and I know you ain't never seen no chinks on TV, no chinks on the radio, no shit like that. So I'm gonna be a poet and I'm gonna be rich, so fuck you, right? Because it was like a double rebellious, right? Like I won't be in anything that you expect me to not be in. I'll be in something that no one wants to be in and be really rich at it, right? So then I see Regie on this vacation. My dad, drove us to New York, whatever. Just flipped me the fuck out. This dude, right, yo, they don't make them like Regie no more because these motherfuckers ain't trained like that. This cat had dynamic, physical, vocal range on a level that's like, you have to have that kind of control when a ton of non-Asians is looking at you like, and what? And what? We at the Nuyorican, so what? So you a person of color, what? Who cares? Whatever, right? And so that just boom, 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 right? But beyond that, I would say I'll be real 100 million% honest here. All of y'all and all the people we mentioned and many more that we haven't, they exist in my being today in ways that I've yet to articulate. They exist in the way that I talk to younger Asian Americans. They exist in the way I tell people of color about, yo, there's a greater game. And this shit ain't just about skill and talent. There's some fuckness out there. It's systemic, it's you know what the word is, it's real. And it shows up in the way I welcome voices, in the way I don't see myself, not only as, you know, part of the insecurity and arrogance of saying I'm the only one is because you feel like there's no place for you. Or I felt that way. So it's like, there's no place for, I'm gonna carve the place where I'm the only motherfucker. You will know me as singular because you see me as a broad blanket, so fuck you, right? But when I started, like, after I moved to New York, there is two paths I could have taken. I was at NYU at the Tisch School. I could have been like fucking white rich, y'all. I could have been a multi-millionaire that overdosed at 32. That was my personality. I was on the track to either overdose at 32 or fucking this other shit that happened when, like, Nancy Bulalaka was like, hey, we want you to do a reading and we wanted to give you money. I was like, money? Oh yeah, I want that. I'm gonna see how she reacts to me saying a number that I think is impossible to achieve. What is that number? $700? Yes, yes. Oh my God, $700. I'm the most richest dude on earth. So I do this reading. That reading leads to me teaching their summer program, at which Ishle and Taiyo's at the summer program. So I experience these fucking poets like, look, everyone knows I got this like attitude. It's like, fuck this shit is whack. But Ishle had this gear that was like, fuck you. Like, she had a poem that was straight up like, nah, you, the one with the collar, with the fucking thing, fuck you, right? And Taiyo had this shit, which I didn't understand at the time, was that like, because he was 17. So first, I don't know who he was learning this shit from, right? Like playing pro level basketball, but reading books all the time. I don't know what that is. And this dude was like, we're like, oh, it's not just me, man. It's like the people. It's all the people, man. And he would just always be about like, there was this people, this community, this group. Didn't get it. But what I did get, and I never articulated it, I never fucking understood it. And this point about what brought you actually into the work of this, yeah? Because I was a poet before, but I was about to be like the emperor's favorite pet kind of poet. You know what I'm saying? Like, that could have really gone down. Like, I almost got that role in Blades of Glory, where I was like the Dragon Queen, like love interest of Will Ferrell and shit. It was like his coach. It was so weird. So, side note. Point being, you know, they, for whatever reason, maybe it was like I could fuck up white people's minds. It's because I got opportunities. It's like mind blowing, whatever. They let me in for whatever. I don't even know. Maybe I dressed super fly, whatever. But like Ishle, Taiyo, Nancy, Jeannie Wong, Chati, Kaima, fucking all this fucking feedbacks. You know, F. Omar Talon. Oh my God. Like Masi. Oh my God. You know, all these people. You're like, what? You know, if it's not for them bringing me on the ride, and when I say the ride, I mean 2 a.m. K-Town learning what Makali is. When I say the ride, I'm talking about rooftop getting high as fuck at midnight, just being like, did you hear this album though? Like this ride, this humanization of their existence deconditioned me in ways that books could never get through to me. So I could hear information on a stage and be like, due to my condition, I'm, like I said, up top, pre-internet Oklahoma, I could have just been, that's not Tarantino. You know what I'm saying? But they brought me in this ride where that humanity let me see like the purpose, the value, the potency of their work and everything. And if they don't welcome me in on that level, then I never go, fuck it, I'll go to the summit. And that shit was crazy. Because the summit had all this other shit going on because we was young. What else is new? We was literally under 25. Like, how much hormones is going on then that's just driving us crazy and shit we don't understand, right? Like, whatever. But if I don't go to the summit and I don't have my entire environment change for the first time in my life, because growing up in Oklahoma, I was never Filipino enough for Filipinos, never Chinese enough for Chinese. So we was never in like that. But at that hotel, late at night, every day in circles, just fucking talking. John Eric, people giving each other money and food when no one there had money or food. Like, that shit is hard, right? So if I'm not in that 4 days of completely enwrapped with all of y'all, then I don't know or feel that there's place that isn't just a reaction to what white people want. For lack of I'm shorthanding it, but that's what I said. So to me, it is a confluence, like I said earlier, of instances, magical shit. Like, I'm gonna say this one time, ain't no one ever gonna be like we was, because the confluence of events on Earth, the confluence of events of where we were at that time in America, post all these fucking global conflicts, rising into our early adulthood, just as the internet is being invented, and developing the technology to traverse our voices through state lines in ways that had never occurred to bridge fucking countries. There will never be another group like us, just by nature of that confluence of fucking factors and shit, right? And it shows in the way we show up and how we are open and how we are dynamic without having to be imitative and all that shit. So it's Nancy Balakaw, it's Nancy Yap, it's everyone in Feedback Collective leading me down the road to fucking the Sang Mahal and the summit. And that day at the finals at the Slam, when I was doing that Sang Mahal poem, my white dude on my own team was like, don't do that. You're not gonna score as high. You need to do like the one you're known for. You need to do When I Get the Money. Like, ain't no one gonna be into this Sang Mahal. That's beautiful, but that's, a Sang Mahal, what? And that's probably one of the only 3 times I've ever done that poem, because it was about a moment, right? So that was everything that put me on the path. It didn't mean I'd applied it. Didn't mean I'd understood it. It didn't mean I'd let go of all my fucking shit that I'm still working on. But if these things don't happen, I don't get put on the path to later blossom in my mid-30s out of some of this shit I had really been growing up as a child. And I probably do end up really rich but dead. And that's how I got into the jams. People welcoming me into their lives and bringing me along for their ride. That's good, Oh, passing the batons. I'll pass the baton to this cat because I brought him up. I know stuff, but because Reggie was like the first. And for me, everybody like if I don't see him like y'all, you don't know what it's like, y'all. Maybe you do, because I don't know where y'all from. But I'm in Oklahoma, fucking watching TRL every fucking day, fucking HBO rerun shit every fucking day. I'm fucking have this dream of New York. I don't even know what the fuck it is, because all I see is motherfucking Carson, whatever his name is, on TRL. And I fucking end up in this poetry thing because MTV makes spoken word unplugged. And to just see Reggie physically in the fucking flesh at the Nuyorican. And y'all know what the Nuyorican is. It's not welcoming regardless who you is. It's Apollo-esque. It's Apollo-esque over there, right? I don't even know where I'd be. So Reggie, the floor is yours.
Oh Lord, Beau Sia, y'all. Lord, I don't know what to say. This pandemic is wearing my voice. It's past my bedtime. I'm in DC. I got my pajamas on. I'm gonna have my milk. I'm old. I'm losing my hair in the back. You can't tell, but it's okay. It's all good. I started performing poetry in 1993 at the Nuyorican Poets Cafe. I was desperate. It was Easter trip between B and C, and I got to read my poems. And then I don't know if they're gonna want to hear a Filipino poem, but I'm pissed. So I do my Filipino poem, and I get a standing ovation. And my Filipinos never get standing ovations in Prince George's County, Maryland. This is fucked up. So I'm gonna come back because I want to win that $10. And I didn't win that $10, so I came back again. And I started reading my poems at the Nuyorican Poets Cafe. And a lot of my entrance into spoken word is through the poetry slam. And the more different I was, the more people listened when I talked about being queer. And if it wasn't for the poetry slam, I don't know if I would have come out of the closet, but at that point, I was going to be full-on Filipino and full-on super gay. Like, I want to be gay. And so Nuyorican Poets Cafe, yes. And I saw Beau. Beau sent me a letter with lechon, pig on a stick. I'm like, what is this? Who is this crazy, this little kid doing these little drawings? But he knew my poems. I want to give a shout out to Asian American Writers Workshop because I'm going to do a screen share, and Eileen Tabios put this photo up. So Asian American Writers Workshop, I owe a lot because I didn't have the kind of Barcada group. I wish that I did have other queer Asian spoken word folks that could really inspire, but because so many of my mentors died during the AIDS crisis, and the Asian American Writers Workshop was a way to nurture new talent and to find mentorship. So I want to give a shout out to this because this is some of that Broadway shit that I brought. Because I did ballet training, so I could like really get my feet up in the air. So that's a secret to winning a slam, is that you have to be able to levitate. It's levitate or demonic possession. You have to be possessed to do a slam, to read your poem in front of like white people who like stare at you funny. I owe a lot to Aga Shahid Ali. I owe a lot to Fei Chang. I owe a lot to Tim Siebels, who were my teachers. But I do want to say that for all of the work that I have heard, you have inspired me to be better as a writer, and also just to have courage, because even though I'm old, it doesn't stop. And I am learning each day, not just from you who have the guts, but also from even younger voices. So I'm just happy to be here because it's easy to be forgotten. Spoken word especially is ephemeral, and this is before YouTube. So I got lots of stuff on High 8. I got some VHS tapes. They're taking half of my apartment. Help. I'm going to turn it over to Ishle Yi Park. Ishle.
Aloha, y'all. So good to see you. I just want to first say I'm so grateful to be in this space with all of you right now. I had no idea how much I missed y'all until this came up. And, you know, going through this whole pandemic thing, I was kind of in my funk and I wasn't sure if I was going to show up, you know, but then something in me was like, I want to see all these people again. Like how many years later, I want to see your face. I want to give you a virtual hug and just remember what it was like to be in that space together, because it really was special. I mean, it really is something sacred. And even here in this virtual room, I feel all of our ancestors here with us from all of our respective nations. And it's a beautiful, beautiful blessing to be here with you. And for me, I guess my journey started at the Asian American Writers Workshop, which was like a second home to me. And my mom brought me over there. And, you know, like Beau said, I was filled with a lot of rage at that point. So a lot of the early poems were mad. And yeah. But that's where I found my community, and that's where I found my people. And I remember taking a workshop with Regie Cabico, and he was so creative and funny and just like hilarious and also brilliant in class and encouraging. So it was just wonderful to learn from him. And in terms of bravery, like you have so much bravery. And so there are so many people in this little space in this circle here who have taught me about bravery. And so I'll just go down the line. I think my first workshop was with Regie Cabico, and then, you know, it was in New York. We were at the Basement Workshop, and I would go to the Nuyorican sometimes. And I remember going to the Nuyorican one time and seeing this force of nature on stage. He was very quiet off the stage, and then when he got on, he exploded with this beautiful combination of rage, passion, brilliance, humor, and that was Mr. Beau Sia. And I remember, I think I had a little crush. I was a little shy to talk to him, but eventually I was like, who is this man? And he's just putting it all out there. So it was wonderful to be inspired by him. And he opened a door for me because at the time I didn't really know any Asian American women who were doing that out there. So he really opened the door in my heart to see what is possible. And then I have to say that, you know, he really helped me and guided me in the whole, you really helped me, Beau. You took me by my hand and you were solid. And, you know, when I was a baby in that whole, poetry scene, you were there with support, with moral support. And you were just like a big brother to me and more, you know, and so many things and more, not just a big brother, but friend. And Beau introduced me. I remember one night he was like, oh, yo, we got to go to NYU. These people are coming. I think you're going to really like them. And I was like, ooh, who's this? And it was the Tongues. I still remember that night. It was so, blew my mind, you know how it is. So I saw Marlon and Anida and Dennis and Emily, and it was love at first sight, you know. And it was a chance for us to see ourselves reflected, you know. You guys are the pioneers of doing this kind of stuff. There was really like nothing out there before, but a lot of people in this room were like the first that I ever saw, and I was like inspired by greatly. So after that, I believe, I was enamored with y'all, and I asked to write an article about you. And Taiyo was in the writing workshop. I was at the time working later at the Asian American Writers Workshop as the arts and ed director and doing youth programs. And Taiyo was a baby. He was 17 years old. He came into that workshop, but he's always been an old soul. He's always been about community. He's always been wise beyond his years. And, you know, still to this day, you're like a connector, you know, you're connecting all of us right now. So that was amazing. And it was a very special time. And during this time, it was like a wave. It was like a wave that we rode together, and we discovered each other pre-internet, you know. We were so thirsty for it because we didn't see ourselves reflected anywhere else so honestly, so beautifully, so brilliantly. So, and, you know, we cared about each other. We cared about the world. We weren't like the, you know, stereotypical or the typical kind that just care about the money. We wanted to express our souls and help other people. And it was really moving to meet a collective of souls like that. And then to actually go to Seattle and then to see the summit and the coming together of all these groups, it was epic. I mean, for us, it was like Eighth Wonder. I was born with two tongues. Isang Mahal, feedback. It was like Voltron coming together. Everybody was like meeting and crying on rooftops and bonding. And it really had a special place in my heart, you know? And it was the first time that I felt like loved, protected, safe, seen, and just in a container that felt beautiful and holy in a way. And it was, you know, we're sharing our poetry from our hearts and our souls and these songs, and we were in our 20s. We were young ones together, my friends. I love you. So yeah, there are a lot of beautiful times, and I'm grateful to so many people in this collective. And then Sham, where is she? Hello, hot sister. Yeah, she's just so passionate and like heartfelt, and her poetry is so moving. And Yalini is magical and mystical, and Anida with the fire and the truth and the way she speaks, you could just like make a kind of I don't know. You're just so brilliant, sister. So and Maya, with the loving energy. Everybody here, Bao Phi also blew me away. I think I was too intimidated to even talk to him after I first saw him the first time because I was like, whoa. He's so smart and so fiery. Like everybody here, Geo, amazing, amazing MC. And so yeah, this is a really special group of people. And of course, there's others who make up this huge collective. And we were definitely part of this humongous beautiful wave that we all rode, and it was a special time for me, and I'm so grateful that I was a part of it with all of you, so thank you.
It's something else, like just hearing everybody. Thank you for showing up. So yeah, so this last prompt for now, right? Because it's just for now. There's always more to tell, more to say, more to share, more to pass on. Is appreciations, like stories and perspectives that reflect an appreciation for the time or the uniqueness of the generation. Like, why does this matter even today in 2022? And this particular prompt, I'm thinking of what you were saying in some of our previous conversations, during the pandemic. Like, why does this little gap of the 90s, early 2000s get omitted a lot? And one thing that I was thinking of in preparation for this event was what makes these poets our this group and collective and movement and generation, whatever you want to call it, of poets, are poets of the oral tradition. And we already brought some of our ancestors in the room here. Like, we are poets, in the spirit of Jessica Hagedorn and Faye Chang and Amiri Baraka and Ntozake Shange and Sonia Sanchez and Al Robles, and so many other folks. Like, and being poets of the oral tradition is different. It's really, I think there's a political nuance to it, a whole other thing to it. And Yalini, you said there's certain something about being accountable to our communities. And at the same time, a lot of us were talking about like being at a space like the New Eurekan or wherever, at a bar, at some grassroots event or at a rally, and being able to speak and move that crowd as opposed to a virtual space. So I think being poets of the oral tradition is something that is a certain kind of uniqueness. And I know, Bao, Quincy Troop was a huge influence on you, as a young poet. So, hey, yeah. And would anybody like to start with that kind of prompt? Like, what made this unique, and why does it matter in 2022?
I'm just going to jump in. The 90s was multicultural literature boom. So I was blessed to be in the queer anthologies, the Asian anthologies that came up. What I think is unique is the kind of network that we created before there was an internet, and the kind of outreach that our messages were going to have, whether someone bought our chapbook and passed it on, or we had that CD. It was sort of this new network that was not internet, but was this soulful tribe movement of voice to voice that was creating the movement. And I think that's what is special about this particular group that is in this platform now. The way that we have connected before that internet kind of fake connection. It is so genuine, and the connection had letters and postcards, right? And that doesn't exist. So I'm grateful for that.
Yeah, I'd like to second that. It was what was on my mind as well, that you know, that in-person connection that was built so organically, so many different moments that you know, bonded us, but also uplifted us to take back to our respective worlds. Just that pre-internet time for so many connections to take place, I think makes it very special. But also just, you know, I think as I reflect in this pandemic of just being denied seeing people, just like how important that in-person physical, just hearing people, physically hearing people in spaces and being together in spaces, whether at a coffee table or on a roof, or in some auditorium, and having these, I would say, sort of sacred moments. It felt very sacred when I look back at it, especially now when we're so denied that kind of contact with just years of this pandemic now.
If I can hop on real quick, you know, what I really appreciate about this time. So what I'll say is every single person who's on this call right now, and a lot of people who aren't on this call that we've talked about, I remember at several points, you know, without exaggeration, being in awe of the work, in awe of the poetry, in awe of what y'all were doing in community, right? But at the same time, I never felt like anyone in this call or the people we mentioned was unapproachable. You know what I mean? Like I never felt like people were like ego tripping in the community. I never felt like there were those barriers there, where I was like, oh, I can't talk to somebody because they're like above me. And I really appreciate that, because I feel like in that era, a lot of folks that I look up to, you all included, were community first people, you know, like it wasn't about like really like building these towers up under ourselves, you know what I mean, to like you know, of course we wanted to be successful in different ways, how we would, you know, define that, right? But I never felt like people were like ego tripping it or doing any of that. I mean, we all have flaws, we all have conflicts, sure, you know what I mean, but what I really appreciate about that time was I didn't feel like outsized egos were a part of this community, and I still appreciate that so much about those times and how we are together.
I think that there was such a deep generosity, and you can hear that and feel that even in this gathering, of how generous, you know, everybody is in giving acknowledgement before it became like a thing, which is what it is now. Like everyone is so aware of that, and that period there was like a hole in so many of us, and we didn't know that hole could be filled in the ways that we ended up filling it, by holding space for others and by holding ourselves to a craftsmanship, because that's the other thing, is everybody that's here are such geniuses when it comes to their writing and their performance of the writing. And that was really important. I know for the tongues, it wasn't like we just wrote one draft of something, you know, like we worked at it, revising and editing and being really precise about what we were putting out there. And of course it changed once you perform, and you're adapting to that as well, in that energy, and you know, the different pauses that you need to now take, or like the way that voice is crescendo, all of that. And so we were putting so much of that energy out because we wanted people so badly to see us. you know, and to know that that kind of visibility, which felt impossible before, we started to see. And once we started to connect with others, they were doing it and they were just as good, you know, and that was like so powerful to have that. And then Bao, what you just spoke about, the approachability of folks. I grew up as someone who never got fucking hugs in my family, and love was so different. But like within the tongues, you know, Dennis was the fucking best hugger, and I had to learn how to hug, you know, re-hug. And like every fucking performance, we couldn't just leave because people wanted hugs from us. And that was the first time in my life that I was like, oh my God, I gotta stay and like give these hugs and like learn to be better at it. And, you know, of course, and, you know, I'm known as unapproachable. But slowly, you know, slowly it sort of, I started to open myself up, and the poetry and the people I met helped me to do that, and the tongues for sure. And of course, now hugs is such a big thing. And then with the pandemic, that being taken from us, it is such, for me, you know, so interesting to figure out now, to relearn to do that socially, and how much that's become a part of me. It's been a 20-year journey with hugging and holding and embracing, but I feel like that was part of it. This sort of hugging and holding, I think, is like a big theme for that period that I love so much.
Yeah, I you know, I wouldn't have experienced that kind of physical comfort if I hadn't been hanging out with the feedback folks all those nights we weren't trying to be geniuses. Like really for me, like all those non-genius nights changed my life, like who I am as a person, how I approach other people, whatever level of empathy I've developed came from that. And I always say like this idea of what can 2022 learn from the era, you know, obviously, like Maya said, like all these things are coming up now, right? And one of the things y'all are making me remember is we were explorers, and we weren't trying to make our lives a shortcut to get the most attention from strangers. And I worry about this world, regardless what age the people are in 2022, this cultural era of how can I make my life a shortcut to get the most attention from strangers? But we're just explorers. Like I had no idea like why knowing what Taiyo knows would be important to me one day. Why seeing all y'all perform would not change my performance directly, but would evolve my understanding of what art can be. Like, because I was just like on the ride, and like I was remembering, like, if I don't go to Summit, I might spend another 5 years not knowing what banh mi is. Like I got to introduce from like the littlest to the biggest, you know what I'm saying? Like all the details, the nuanced stuff. So I would just say 2022, y'all, like, y'all don't know what possibility is, because y'all don't know that y'all ain't letting yourself be the explorers you could be. And you're letting yourself be limited by what a screen dictates as the parameters of living. And that alone has prevented you from being how dope we fucking are. Just kidding. Just kidding. Y'all are great. But I do worry. I worry.
I have to jump in. Exploring, that struck me. Oh, thank you. But you know, going back 20 plus years, where we were at, we were exploring. And for me, it just brings me back to Islam Hall. You know, we were exploring vulnerability and just really exploring our heart. How much can we share and share our brokenness, share our scars, share like our hurt, share like all the shit, you know, like we were writing shit like first draft, dude, right before the fucking open mic was gonna start. We're just gonna share it. We just felt like we needed to share it, because or else we're gonna like freaking shrivel up and like I don't even know. It was like that kind of thing was going on. And for some reason, the more we did that, the more people, would kind of like come in and do their own thing. And that was like, that's how I feel this whole thing kind of, for me, it was just really that like vulnerability. And I missed that. Cause like now, with social media, all this crap, ego crap, image, it's just like we're all like hiding now again. And we're just like, oh, this is what's going on with me. And all these little like short, little like expressions. We're not even like, I don't know, I miss that fearlessness of like that we had at that time to just be like completely, we were falling apart in each other's arms back then. We were freaking crying and we didn't even know why. We're just like, it was just like, where is that now? And I know, it's evolved, obviously, like the seeds have been planted and it's evolved in ways we don't even know how right now. And it's just like, the goal is, I think, it's just to stay connected to the younger generation, the babies, everybody all along the way, elders, just like keep listening, keep sharing, keep staying vulnerable and sharing from our heart, whatever the fuck comes up, whatever, be your authentic selves. And I really believe that's what brought us together, is what's gonna keep us going and keep everyone else doing whatever they need to do in the moment that it arises, and we met that moment, at the time that it came for us to do that together. And I'm so proud and thankful and grateful. That's always going to be part of me. And just like now I feel like supporting whatever's going on in the universe that is like calling the next generations or whatever to do what they need to do and do whatever we need to do to help that happen as it did for us. Because it's mysterious, it's a big ass fucking mystery. But we met it and I love y'all. Let's do this again, because and I have so many details I want to share with whatever archive that's happening, because there's so many people who did so much before that I really feel needs to be, we need to thread this kind of story together. And I just have so much respect for folks who aren't here as well, and for all of you. So thank you. Much love.
Thank you, Maya. That was so beautiful, and y'all are so beautiful. You touched my heart, and that's why I'm here. I took a journey from my little jungle cottage in the middle of nowhere to be at a place with good Wi-Fi to be in contact with y'all. And I feel like I'm so grateful that I did it, because it's just bringing back all these beautiful memories. And whether or not we knew it, as young as we were, as crazy, as imperfect, we shared our stories, we shared our heart, we shared our vulnerabilities with the world. And we were the young griots of our times, and we taught each other. I learned more about Asian American history from all of y'all than any textbook. I learned about Vietnamese culture, Chinese, Filipino, the South Asian. We learned from each other's stories, and the most realist, most authentic, true, reflection of the struggles and the beauties and the experiences that we had, I learned from you and your poems and your songs more than anything I ever learned in school. And so I think there's something really beautiful and valuable in that. And we weren't doing it like the way people are doing it now, like for money or for clout or for whatever. We were doing it because we needed to express this and share it. Otherwise, we wouldn't be able to survive. And then we've connected and we found each other. And there was such a beautiful miracle in that, So yeah, I think that still to me is a treasure, and I'm grateful for all of you.
Thank you.
사랑해.
I'm like threading all the different things that folks are saying. Taiyo, when we think about the ancestral legacy of the oral tradition, my understanding of the old ways is that the storytellers were the truth tellers, and the oral word was so much more valued than the written word, because it meant you told the truth. You know, the written word was for contracts or for people you didn't trust, but like the one that was passing on the history of the community, that one that was, facilitating the knowledge between past and present to the future, who was facilitator between earth and sky, between the cosmos and to the people. We were the people whose truth you trusted. And I think when just listening to how y'all, we were talking about that time, it wasn't mediated by neoliberalism. It was self-organized spaces that was, it was an effective emergent cultural strategy. We brought, as June Jordan said, poetry to the people. I mean, we, through our storytelling, the ways in which we, as Ishle, you just said, transformed each other through our multiple truths, right? I mean, that's how we also the space open for survivors that to talk about child sexual abuse, to talk about intimate partner violence, to talk about the ways in which intergenerational trauma impacted our communities, to talk about our experiences as queer people, as non-binary people, as trans people. We were able to claim space in a world that deemed us invisible through our storytelling and truth. And the ways in which we built our movement was through self-organized spaces that was not mediated by dominant media, by neoliberalism, by dominant institutions, but through our love and connection to each other, which felt like me spiritually mediated, right? So vibrationally mediated, magnetized, and brought together. And I feel like we were able to unite through a commitment to justice and liberation. It wasn't about merely representation. I feel like if it was representation, I wouldn't have had a space, because I'm like a minority of a minority of a minority of a minority, like I don't represent the dominant South Asian, whatever experience, but because the space valued liberation, I had something to offer, right? And so I think, and that allowed for us to grow together. And I know that sometimes wasn't easy. And I know that was also part of the tears, was the deconditioning that I think Beau spoke to, right? And then the disconnection and the reconnection, the loving each other, getting angry with each other, loving each other again. So, those are just some of the things that I really, really appreciate, and yes, to the generosity that required.
I feel like everything I was gonna say, someone said, and said it way more articulate. But yes to all and everything that y'all have said. I'm in the same space without having talked, except for maybe Anida and Taiyo, because y'all came into Chinatown and I went to the Filipino spot with Taiyo. It's crazy how much I feel like I've matured alongside y'all spiritually when I'm hearing a lot of how we see ourselves in our generation. And it's bittersweet. I'm with Beau. Like, there will never be anyone like us. We're the bridge generation between yellow power and whatever the shit on the internet is, it's like when I hear like this neoliberal co-opting of a lot of shit that we saw and witnessed and built, I get to say that, like, yo, I actually was in places where, like, people said that shit and meant it, like before land acknowledgements were said in mainstream spaces, and spaces were called safe spaces, and motherfuckers was talking about self-care before it became a commercial movement. Like, I actually get to say, like, yo, I saw that shit, like, for real happen. And it was led by the marginalized people in our marginalized communities, like before, rich Asian kids who got proud of being Asian their freshman year in college took over this whole shit. Like it was working class folks, it was women, it was queer folk, it was refugees. Like it was almost like the more marginalized you were, the more you were going to be encouraged to have the mic. And I hope we see some kind of like pendulum swing back in that direction. But I will always appreciate that time of like being able to have experienced the genuine version of some shit that I think a lot of people are looking for and don't know actually existed.
I'm not sure if I can articulate this, but a lot in the chat is bringing this up, but just there were like complexities that we were all dealing with beyond the representation, and to be able to deal with everybody's scars and shortfalls like with each other, like that was a big deal, especially when it was so easy to be torn apart by everything else that you saw that just kept denying our existence, you know, kept denying our humanity. And so maybe that's why, for example, I worked at sort of a burnt out pace to try to keep making these spaces. Because if it wasn't the summit and it wasn't the tongues, then it was, you know, YOP, the Asian teenage space. Then it was the artist collective. Then it was Mango Tribe. It was like I kept doing this because I wanted these spaces to keep reminding me that I am beautiful, that I'm valuable, and that people will love and accept me, even if the rest of the world is telling me like that I am nothing more than these stereotypes. So I think that that's important, because by having those spaces that then brought these friendships, these intense friendships and this camaraderie, and then ultimately some folks being family, you were just held, you know, sometimes to an accountability. And you could have these talks that it wasn't like this vicious call out culture, you know, that currently I feel is a bit of a trap. That is, I think, really, really problematic. And I think those are the things that I hang on to, because it's what I'm bringing back into my classrooms as I'm teaching. It's like this, like, you know, okay, so like if somebody misspoke, let's talk about that and why they chose those words, because maybe they weren't politicized the way you were, or came into some books to teach you how to say certain things, and that's something we can't fault them on, you know. So like everything that is informing me as a teacher and the way that I maneuver is definitely coming from these past work with a lot of you, and with what we tried to build as a community that was so everywhere, right? Everywhere and anywhere. But at some point you could just pause and you can call someone up and, you know, just have that. And I really hang on to that.
We're coming up on almost our time. Anyone else? Any last ruminations, things y'all want to share before we close for just tonight? We should do this again somehow.
Hey, shout out to the rooster. Is that a rooster out there? Is that you?
Yeah. Y'all come
Yo,
here
that
to
brings me home. Oh my God. Yo, I needed to hear that. I needed to hear that.
All the officials Zoom.
Oh, and my parting thought is that, oh my God, you all look good. Holy shit.
Don't we though? We all look real good. We clearly live life for real. We look gorgeous. We really, to have been through what we've been through without the nutritional knowledge these young folks have today, we didn't have none of that knowledge.
No.
What I know about pasta.
Yeah, are they gonna look like this in 22 years?
Nope,
Shit.
not one. Not one.
We were taught that bread was a food group.
Right, one of the four. Of four, bread is its own thing. Like, oh shit. Man.
We ate white rice and it like would become brown rice because it stayed in the rice cooker for so long.
Right, you burned the pot.
Just real quick, one thing that I thought about, you know, like when we've been like reminiscing about the old days and like we all talk so long, but it made me think of like that first summit in Seattle. Remember, every single night there would be like 100 of us standing in the street just talking for hours, and we would be like, okay, but we got to get to a restaurant before it closes, right? and so we would like figure out the restaurant. We'd be like, okay, man, see you. We would give out hugs for like half an hour, and then everyone's like, we're going to the same place anyway. It's like, oh, okay. Like, and that like happened every single night. It was dope. It was hilarious and dope.
Oh man, I love that. Goodbyes before going to the next place where you're gonna see each other. That shit happens so often. Man, that's when Shang Wang introduced me to Twix inside of Cheese Whiz.
Oh, Lord.
That's it. And then John Eric Concordia was like, I brought mushroom tea. Let's get
I
down.
remember that
everybody."
mushroom tea.
But hey, I want to say this. Maybe we're gonna do one of these again, right? But this made me realize, like, let's also do this every 10 years, no matter what happens. You know, in 10 years, if the world is where, you know, we're still alive, blah, 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 whatever, let's just hire some young kids to do a summit for us that we just hang out at. You know, just trick some college kids with energy to do this for us. You know what I'm saying?
No, really though, I wanted to also just recognize the ancestors, our ancestors, and just like the ancestral trauma healing process that I feel like was a huge key factor in why we came together and why this work continues and why we got to continue helping, supporting the next generations to keep letting it flow, letting it go, and keep growing and stuff.
And I just also want to add, like, some of these, the Gen Zs, the younger poets, they're amazing and they're brave and they're dealing with a lot of stuff we didn't have to. You know, in some ways we were a little blessed not to have the internet for good chunks of our life. And
True.
They have to deal with the internet, they have to deal with this pandemic and become themselves and in all of this and still express themselves, and they still are. And so I just wanted to send some love to them too, with, you know, without making comparisons between us. I think all of this is an energy that continues, and what we experienced came from before us. As we're thinking about our ancestors, that came through with us and is coming through now with these younger generations. And so it's like all a continuity in my mind, at least. I hope, you know, I do think like this isn't just like lost in the ether, all that love we cultivated and all of what we did cultivating, it's not lost in the ether. That energy has kept moving, I believe. And I do see glimpses of it in, you know, younger poets and communities. So I just want to throw that in there.
So I'm ready for the Quiet Before spoken word tour with y'all. I'm ready to make it happen. Get your vax cards. Get your mask.
Let's go.
I think what's hard to believe is that the 90s is coming back into fashion. And I can't even fit in some of those clothes that I have.
Oh yeah, my six. Oh my God, I lost track of. 17-year-old is all about the 90s gear right now.
You got a 17-year-old Geo. Wow.
Yeah, graduating from high school this year.
God bless.
Yeah.
Wow.
And
Yeah.
19 now. 19.
19?
What?
19.
What?
Sophomore in college.
Oh God.
He's
Wow. The
overlay,
Boston
right?
babies, the Boston Summit babies are going to college.
Wow.
That's beautiful.
Wow.
Yo, I'm on 1% on an old ass computer. So if I knock out, it's not because I did it on purpose, but I just want to say I love you all if it happens. And it was so good to share space with you and see you again. God bless you all. And thank you for everything you do to make this world better. 사랑해.
Love you, Ish.
I love you too.
Always.
Love you, Ishel.
I love you. Aloha.
Send the girls love from
I
me,
will.
Auntie Sham.
Oh my gosh. They're growing up fast.
I love all of y'all, and I'm getting the signal to close before anybody else's batteries die out. Yeah, we gotta do this again some way, some form.
Someone screen grab this.
Oh yeah, somebody screen.
Yes, please.
Who's screen grabbing?
Who's doing
Hey,
it?
Nancy, Nancy, can you?
Is somebody doing it?
Because our hands.
Thank you, Nancy.
Nancy's got it.
Yeah.
Quiet before. Check out,
Aloha.
especially for organizing and curating. Thank y'all for showing up and doing this.